Good evening and welcome to the second session in our Big Room Refresh event series in association with the White Company. My name is Jessica Doyle. I'm the Telegraph's Design and Interiors Editor. And over the next 45 minutes, we're going to be looking at ways to dress your dining table. First up, we've got a live demonstration with the wonderful floral stylist, Philippa Craddock, who's going to be showing us how to make a beautiful floral centerpiece that's simple yet effective. And then later on, we're going to be joined by the White Company's Chief Creative Officer, Mark Winstanley, who's going to be sharing his expert tips for how to style your table for a special meal. And without further ado, I'd like to introduce Philippa Craddock. Hello, hello, Philippa. Hi, how are you?
Jess. I'm really
Very well, thank you. It's lovely to see you.
Yeah, likewise, very much likewise. Thank you
Thanks
so
for
much
joining us.
having
We're
me.
honoured. Can you tell us a little bit about the arrangement you're going to be making this evening and the flowers that you'll be using?
Yes, oh my goodness, of course. So we are creating a really, really beautiful but so simple table design. So perhaps for Easter, or certainly a spring design. And we're using soup tureen. So this is a dish that I happen to have from my kitchen. And sustainable mechanics, so without using any floral foam. We're using chicken wire. And then these beautiful tulips, which have been grown by Smith & Munson. And I know Joe Munson is here watching this evening. So hello, Joe. It's lovely to have you here as well. Thank you so much for sending me these tulips. And I'm going to show how you can build the design. Just there's a couple of really neat little tricks that I'm going to take you through that just sort of takes your design from being really beautiful, but just really elevated.
And how many tulips will you be using to make it?
So I've got a lot in front of me. I have about 100 stems in front of me, but I'm going to be using probably anywhere between about 30 and 50 stems in total.
Great. Okay, well, should we get started? Perfect.
Yes, let's. So hopefully there's a few people that are going to be following along at the same time. So the chicken wire, so this was about 40 centimetre square section. And all I've done is I've sort of scrambled it up, being quite careful because it can catch your hands a little bit. And I folded it into about 4 or 5 layers. And that is just going to be placed inside. So once that's there, it sort of acts like a scaffold and a framework for the flowers. So because the bowl comes in, I don't have to worry about the chicken wire coming out. If you're using a bowl that's wider at the top, then it's quite a good idea to put some tape down to make sure the chicken wire remains exactly where it is as you start adding the flowers. So once the wire's in, I'm then going to add some water. So I'm filling this up about half full, so between half and so 2/3 full. You want a decent amount of water in the tureen. And then I'm going to start placing the tulips in. So the design, what I'm looking for, and I think it's always a really good idea to think about the shape and the style of the design before you start placing all the flowers in. And I want to create something that has got plenty of movement to it. And it's really light, almost as if the tulips are dancing. So it's not going to be overly heavy, but there's going to be plenty of movement through the design. And you'll see the 2 different varieties. These ones are Liebe Star, which are incredible. They have these really beautiful fold petals at the ends. And then I've got Verona. And Verona has got a larger flower head, so it's much heavier. So this one droops over a little bit more. So I'm going to work with the shape of the stems and the way that they droop. So the Liebe Star will be coming up a little bit further, and then the Verona are going to be sort of more towards the edges, drooping out. But I want that slight droopiness because that really adds that sort of sense of movement that we're looking for in the design. And I also, when I'm placing them, I want to make sure that they're all really random. This design really benefits from lots of sort of different placements. You don't want to be too precise about this design. It's about creating something that's a little bit more random. So the first step is I'm going to remove some of the base leaves. And to do that, all I'm doing is just taking the leaf off and I'm just pulling it straight down. And by that way, you're not going to snap the bottom stem.
Sorry, we had a question from
Yes.
Lynn, who wanted to know if you've conditioned the tulips at all before you started.
Yeah, really, really good question. So when the tulips arrived, they were out of water. So the best thing to do with that, because if you find when the tulips arrive, if they haven't had access to water for quite a while, the stems will be quite floppy. So the best thing to do is you take them and you take the paper they've been delivered in, make sure that it's really tightly wrapped. So you want to make sure the stems are straight. Then you cut the ends and take maybe an inch off, maybe even a centimetre. You just want to get a really fresh cut on the base of the stem, and then plunge them into tepid water. So never freezing cold water, and certainly not too hot, but a really sort of nice but a good amount of fresh water. What then happens is the tulip will then draw the water back up the stem, and then as it fills with water, all the cells bring all the water in, and it becomes rigid again. And if it wasn't bound in paper, and you, for example, would place it into the bucket like this, if the tulip was already bent over, then as it became rigid, it would then stay like that. So the trick is making sure that they're being bound really tightly in paper. Hopefully,
yes,
that's a good tip, and that answers that. So in terms of the placement, I want to create a design that's probably about this kind of height. So somewhere between double and maybe sort of 1.5 times. So what I then do is I take the tulip up and I sort of look at the approximate height, and then I'm just simply cutting. Now, on so many stems, you always want to cut at an angle, and that increases the surface area, so it helps to draw more water in. But in softer stems like tulips, often if you do that, they're then damaged by the point. So if you just cut it straight across, it's better with the tulips. And then I'm simply going to place, and I'll tilt this bit so you can see. So a little bit of a labyrinth through the chicken wire, but I'm simply just placing it in. And the chicken wire is brilliant because it just supports the stem brilliantly. And it allows me then to place the stems wherever I want them to go. And then I'm just going to carry on snipping. I have this sort of lovely vision in my head of hundreds of people around the UK, maybe around the world at the moment, that are also snipping tulips and arranging. If you're doing that, I would love to see comments in the box to the side. It'd be really lovely to know that other people are doing this as well. So I'm just randomly placing them in. When you place the flowers in, what you don't want to do, and I begin to pick it up a little bit, is I have a bit of a line going through here. You want to make sure that you have no lines, so you're sort of disrupting those. I'm just going to take that out again and replace it. Just sort of getting it away from the line. And you can see how easy this is. And make sure you're going at all sides. So this design, people are going to be able to walk around it. So I want to make sure it looks good.
We did have a question from someone asking if the chicken wire rusts in the water. Does that happen?
Yeah, that's another super question. Yes, you can though find galvanized chicken wire, and that definitely helps. And that will then prevent it from rusting in the water. So try and find galvanized chicken wire. And you can pick that up from any garden centre, hardware store.
Oh, we have someone making along using a hat box. Oh, yeah.
Oh, amazing. I'm assuming they put a watertight container inside the hat box. That's very cool. I think that's sort of the amazing thing, is you can turn so many different things into vessels, as long as it's watertight. I used to, things like gift boxes are always brilliant. Again, you can perhaps, depending on the size of it, you can just place a jam jar or something like that if it's a really pretty box.
We have a few people asking the names of the tulips, if you wouldn't mind repeating the names of the tulips that you're using. They're so beautiful.
So these ones are Liebestar, and this one here is called Verona, which is amazing. It's got so many petals. And this, I've had this in for the The tulips came in on Friday. Thursday? Thursday, I can't remember exactly when it was. So I've had them for a good few days, but they will last for about 2 weeks. They're of amazing longevity in these tulips. Testament to Jo and her family. So I'm going to mix it up and I'm going to use the Verona. And as I was saying before, they've got a bit more of a bend in them. So these ones I'm going to place so closer to the rim. So I always think whenever you're creating in a vase or a vessel, it's a really good idea to interrupt the lip of the vessel. If I find another bendier one, I'll explain. If you're placing the flowers right towards the edge, you want to begin to break up this line, because otherwise what you end up with is a design where it's just vase and then flowers. And if you have the flowers sort of going over the vessel and interrupting that line, then the whole piece works as one design. And I just think it looks so much better to look at. Everything sort of works in synergy that way. So you can see that some of them, I'm cutting them kind of really short, and other ones are going to be much longer, to making sure I'm staggering the heights. And you can bend them a little bit, but obviously not so much so you snap them. And I think it's such a beautiful design to create maybe for Easter, or certainly at this time of the year. And you may find that, well, Mark's going to talk about some beautiful table designs later on, and you might find that a design like this is perhaps too big for a table when you're sitting down and eating. When you're sitting down eating, you want to make sure it's completely clear and you don't have any sort of any barriers in the way. You certainly don't want to stop the flow of conversation. So this would be brilliant for maybe a whole table or a kitchen island, or maybe even sort of in our sitting room, we've got a sort of one of those sort of low sort of console cushion things. I can't think what it's called now. Like a big footstool. And something like this would look brilliant on there, because you can look sort of into the design as well.
Technical questions that people wanted to recap on, Philippa. How long did you leave the tulips in tepid water before?
So I would leave them in until you were ready to arrange with them. Definitely for at least 12 hours. Give them a really, really good drink overnight. If you can, 24 hours is brilliant. So I've had these, I think they came in Thursday or Friday. So they've been sort of soaking up water for a decent amount of time. But also, if you're buying them sort of for your house and use straight away, as long as they rest for, I think, yeah, a good 12 hours would be fine.
And how do you decide sort of what length to cut them, Philippa? You know, you're sort of cutting them at different lengths, so some are taller than the other. Do you have any tips on that?
So what I'm trying to do is I want to have some of the flowers quite high up, and I want to bring some of them a little bit lower down, so you get plenty of so you want to have this sort of white popping throughout the entire design. So this one, for example, I'm going to add this about here. So there's a bit of a gap here. So I want to make sure that's a little bit lower and further down into the pot. So you don't want to have like one big line of flowers. You want to make sure that it's really distributed. And I think always a good idea, if you cut them a little bit too, it's always better to cut it, not to go too far with the cutting. So if you're not completely certain about the position, go a little bit longer and then cut after that. So for example, this one is just a bit too high. So I'm going to pull it back out again. I'm going to cut it down by another couple of inches. And you can see that as you're beginning to sort of add more stems, the chicken wire is really beginning to be covered. And you definitely want to have the chicken wire covered, otherwise you get left, you don't want to see the mechanics because that kind of spoils the design.
And where did you get your tureen from, Philippa? I think lots of people on the chat are interested in the tureen.
So I was asked this loads today, actually. I can't remember where it came from, but if you just Google white, because it's white, and then tureen, and I'm sure you'll be able to find loads of suppliers. And you can try and find them from really small suppliers. But I remember doing it earlier today, and there was quite a lot that came up. But just Google, and you can hopefully find something that's close to you as well. But it's just a really classic kitchen sort of suit tureen. It should be really easy to get hold of. And it certainly doesn't have to be this. I think that's the sort of wonderful thing about flower arranging is sort of use your imagination when it comes to vessels. It doesn't have to be a specific vase for flowers. It can really be anything as long as it's watertight. So window boxes are a really good option as well and very easy to get hold of. And then any sort of large serving bowls or serving dishes. So you can see I'm just sort of staggering again the height. I'm also going to make sure that plenty of flowers have come into the center as well. And I'm going to turn it around as well so I can see it from sort of all angles. And it's kind of rather fun because it's kind of here, there, and everywhere, the design. But I can definitely see there's a gap in the center. So I'm going to bring some height into there. And you can see that the tulips are sort of dancing, and there's nothing sort of perfect apart from the flowers themselves. But in terms of the position, you want them to be really random.
What other flowers could you suggest that you could work with, Philippa, that would have a similar effect to this that you could use with that kind of arrangement?
So still in spring, ranunculus would be beautiful in this kind of arrangement. Anemones would work really well. We're just sort of coming out of hellebore season, but again, hellebores en masse like this would look so beautiful. And the hellebor's heads sort of beautifully droop over, so they would look amazing around the outsides. And then we're going towards sort of mid-spring, we'll begin to get peonies back in season, and they will look amazing, sort of en masse. Perhaps with some foliage would look incredible. Then garden roses, and then perhaps you can break the garden roses up with some delicate sweet peas. And then towards autumn, you could do a sort of massive hydrangea. Hydrangea are brilliant in this kind of design, particularly if you're using chicken wire.
And how long will it last? And will the tulips go floppy? Will it change shape?
So the tulips, really interestingly, are one of the only flowers that continues to grow. So these stems will begin to come out a little bit further. And it's almost as if they're sort of dancing in the design. And in terms of how long they last, these particular ones will last for about 2 weeks. So as long as they are not directly beside a strong heat source or perhaps in direct light. So if they're left somewhere, just sort of an average sort of room temperature, they should certainly last you for a couple of weeks. Definitely.
How often would you need to change the water? And how would you do that with an arrangement like that?
Brilliant, brilliant question. So this one, it's so easy. You look at it and think, how on earth would I get all the flowers out and make sure the water's really clean? But really easily, all you want to do is, the ideal is if you have a kitchen tap that has a nozzle that you can pull out, place the entire container of the flowers inside the sink, take the nozzle down, and then just flush the water out. So just keep the water running until the older water comes out and it's replaced with new water. If you haven't got a nozzle, then just lift the whole vessel further up. You just don't want a big stream of water coming down and hitting the flowers, because it could break some of the stems. or even a shower
Right.
head. You can even take them into the bath. The shower head, you could use that. But the idea is you just want to wash or flush the older water out and replace it with new water.
Well, Fiona says that she's heard that if you put a pin just below the bud, it stops the tulip from flopping. Do you know if that's right?
Yeah. So the idea with that is if there's an air bubble inside the tulips, you're effectively popping the air bubble and you're allowing the air to then release. I found that sometimes with roses, but I've never found that with these tulips. But it's definitely, if you have one that's sort of overly droopy, it's worth trying it, but it's not something I've ever needed to do. I've also got, so these were flowers that I had in the studio and I just grabbed these last minute. So these designs are beautiful purely just with loads and loads of tulips. But there's another flower that's incredibly pretty and it's in season right now. And these tiny little fritillaries, which are so lovely. I don't know if you can see them, I'm sort of holding them up. And because of the colours, just adding something that's a little bit smaller in between can work really, really well into the design. But this design is perfect just with tulips alone. But I just wanted to show you how suddenly you can create something really pretty. And the amazing thing about tulips is how available they are. You can pick them up from supermarkets. There are so many different suppliers and growers online. Smith & Munson, I think there's a link included, but you can order directly from the farm in the UK and they send them out in these really beautiful tubes. So it's such an easy flower to get hold of. In fact, I had my sister is here and hopefully watching, and she's joined tonight, and she sent me a photograph of somebody had sent her some tulips just today to say thank you, but she already has some flowers to be able to create with. But you can see, hopefully you can see how suddenly by adding something a little bit more delicate, how that changes the design.
And what was the name of that flower again, Philippa, the third flower?
So this singular, it's a fritillaria. And so yeah,
really
aren't they pretty?
Yeah.
Delicate. There's something sort of very clean and simple. I'm hoping when Mark comes on, I hope he approves. It's very, it's very white company. Nice and clean and white. So you can see here again, with this one here, it's got a really sort of lovely curve on it. So I'm just sort of putting that at the front so it curves over. And I wonder if anybody was following me on Instagram today, I put a photograph up of the bookcase behind. And I wonder if anybody had noticed that we then subsequently changed the order of the books. So we've now got a completely different colour. But you have to look at my Instagram because there's a really funny story behind the books behind me. So what I'm doing with these, I'm just any particular gaps. If there's anything, there's quite a lot of green leaves. I'm just breaking up the green leaves with the more delicate flowers. One of these days, I need to get one of those lazy Susans so I can spin it around. And it's just, you can see, it's just such a simple, kind of a bit messy and a bit of a wild design, but so easy to pull together. And it's just one of those things that sort of, instead of putting tulips into a vase or into perhaps a jug, it's just such a great way to be able to display them, and so straightforward that anybody can do this. And I think that's what I love most about floristry, is just it's just sort of encouraging more and more people to have fun and create and design with flowers. I get so much enjoyment from it. And it's sort of one of those things where it just kind of transports you. It doesn't matter what's going on in your life, how busy everything is, and stresses. We've all got lots of stresses at the moment. And then this is just something to do that really, you have to focus on what you're doing, and it just sort of takes you away a little bit. And then you sort of get to pick up and play and touch these incredible flowers. It's an amazing material to be able to work with and create with.
I know you run masterclasses, don't you, Philippa? Have you still been doing that during lockdown as well, and doing them virtually?
So we had our flower school. We launched our flower school originally, back in 2014, and then it sort of went up another gear in 2018, and then what was happening every time we released a date, it sold out so quickly. We couldn't quite keep up with the demand. So we had the idea back then, perhaps we could take all the workshops and the masterclasses online, because we also had students coming from all over the world. And I was slightly conscious of just the amount of air miles we were sort of contributing as well because of that. So we started looking at some of our online classes back in, the first one we launched was 2018, just a really simple, straightforward one at that time. And then they sort of grown and they got bigger. And then the beginning of last year, we launched the very first big proper one, which was Floristry Fundamentals. And it was brilliant. So that one is happening again this year. And then we're about to launch 2 wedding masterclasses. So one that is just specifically for brides and grooms. So me holding their hands and helping them to make sure they can create their own wedding flowers. And then we've got a professional wedding flower masterclass, which is launching in May. And so that's designed specifically for florists and includes everything from flower arranging through to managing teams and profitability. So it gets into a bit of the business side. And then we have the Christmas time masterclass and various things towards the end of this year. So we've got a lot going on. Thank you for asking. So you can see how quickly it builds up. And you can turn it into something really sort of rather fun and quite wild.
Yeah, it looks absolutely stunning. Thank you so much, Philippa. I mean, I can't believe you've done that in less than half an hour. It's really incredible to see what you can do with just one type of flower and a tree. Amazing, really, really beautiful.
I know, and it's not perfect, and I think there's sort of something really wonderful about that. And as you say, it's something you could pull together so quickly.
No, it's great. Thank you.
You're welcome.
I think we're going to bring in Mark Winstanley from the White Company now, who's going to give us his tips on table styling and how to put together a beautiful table, incorporating flowers, but also tableware. So that I think we're all sort of looking forward to Easter and the sort of smaller family lunches that we'll be having this Easter, but then also looking ahead towards the summer when hopefully we'll be able to have more people around and entertain again. Hello, Mark. Thank you for joining.
Hi, Jess. How are you?
Very well, thank you. How are you?
Yeah, I'm good. And thank you, Philippa. That was just so lovely.
Yeah, really beautiful.
It just makes me kind of I'm just so looking forward to being able to get into the garden in the spring and start cutting and foraging again. And Philippa knows how much I love doing flowers at home. So it's I think, as Philippa says, it's just such a lovely thing to lose yourself in and just really kind of while away a bit of time and do something that kind of connects you with nature. It's always such a joy.
Mm-hmm. I think it's something, as you were saying, Philippa, sort of floristry has really taken off over the last year while people have been, looking for things to do to lift the spirits at home. And I think table styling is also a part of that. Would you say, Mark, that people are? Yeah,
I mean, I think, as you said, Jess, I think we're all just so looking forward to, I know I am more than anything, just being able to open the front door and welcome back in family and friends. And I think obviously it would be lovely when we can do that, to just make that a little bit more extra special, to put a a bit more thought and consideration into that table. Make it celebratory, make it memorable, because we've kind of missed so many occasions together over the last 12 months. But I think, and I know I always try to do this at home, you know, we clearly don't lay the table every day of the week, and we don't always kind of sit down together every evening or every kind of lunchtime. But I really make an effort on a Sunday to kind of really kind of just take a little bit of time to kind of lay the table, make that little bit of an effort that we actually sit down together as a family, catch up on the week and enjoy some delicious food. And I think if you love cooking and you love food, then surely making a little bit of effort with the table is that kind of complement to lovely food. And I think as more and more of us eat seasonally, then actually what does that table look like seasonally? So I've just got a few slides to share just to hopefully give some ideas and some inspiration. And I think, as Philippa said, I think it's really the really important thing is keeping it simple. You know, nothing has to be too tricksy. And I've got a kind of couple of kind of key things that I would always advise. For me, if you are trying to lay a table with a little bit more thought and consideration, then I think a tablecloth is the number one. I don't know why. It's a bit like making your bed and having a bed cover. You know, it instantly kind of creates a sense of order and gives you that kind of fast layer. And I think, you know, putting together a lovely table is about layering, is about adding texture. And I think two of the really important ingredients, depending on the time of day that you are eating, are flowers and foliage that Philip has been talking to us about, because I think we all recognise how over the last 12 months that connection with nature, how important that is. But I think, as Philippa has demonstrated, you know, it doesn't have to be overly complicated. In this image, we just have two small ceramic vases with just some very simple greenery and foliage. And I think the really important thing that Philippa mentioned is never anything too large or too high. You know, the point about sitting around the table with friends and family is catching up and having conversation and hopefully kind of having fun. And that's not much fun when you can't see the person opposite you. So bud vases, low vases, and just some simple kind of greenery. And then the other one is obviously candlelight. There's just always something so magical about candlelight that makes any occasion, no matter how small or insignificant, that little bit more special. This tablecloth is actually a new design from the spring collection. It's a print, which is not what the White Company is particularly known for, but it's based on actually a lovely vintage indigo batik print that I have at home in this rather kind of large collection of textiles. And we've just recreated that in a lovely soft grey. So you just get that warmth and that lovely bordered design of the tablecloth and the print. And then I think the other thing that I always think about is the importance of texture. So in this picture, we've used lovely jute placemats and coasters. So you get that lovely natural organic kind of feel. We've used ribbed glassware and little ribbed candle lanterns. So you get that different kind of broken quality of the glass. And the lovely thing about things like ribbed glass is you can layer it with existing simple plain glasses that you have, and it just makes it less kind of matchy, less kind of coordinated. It makes it a little bit more informal in the way that Philippa was describing her flowers. And then I think the really important thing is that, you know, if hopefully you're going to have a lovely long lunch or a lovely long supper, none of us ever want to leave the table. So just make sure it's comfortable. So, you know, a great seat pad, because quite often dining chairs are not that comfortable. So just to make sure you can really stay at the table for as long as possible. So next slide, please. So really, this is very much the same table linen, but taking us outdoors. Philippa mentioned about Easter, and so hopefully if we have some spring sunshine, there might be that opportunity to sit outside. What we've really done in this shot is we've used the same lovely soft printed tablecloth, but we've actually used some white napkins as a placemat. And I'm a really firm believer in this whole idea of trying to find product and ways of using products in more than one way, because it just means that they're then really useful, really practical, and you can get lots of different usages out of them. So that's just a lovely Seville white napkin, a very classic design from our collection with a lovely little insert edge just used. And there's something about having a placemat or a napkin used as a placemat that just creates that individual place setting. And I think the simple thing to remember is no matter how many people you have, whether it's 4 or 6 or 8 or 12, just do one place setting and repeat. And similarly, I'm sure Philippa would give the same advice on flowers. If you've just then got candlesticks and bud vases, lay them out 4 and then just repeat. So you just create this kind of flow down the middle of the table. And with the little vases that we've used on that table, what's great again about that double duty idea is that that particular design works incredibly well as just a water carafe. So again, you've got a water carafe or it's the vase, and so you've got that lovely kind of simplicity. And you've got that lovely bunting. So again, that idea of just a sort of simple celebration. It doesn't just have to be for children's kind of birthday parties. You know, we all like to have a bit of fun as well. So it's just a nice addition in the way that outdoor lighting and fairy lights add that extra sense of kind of magic and a special occasion. And if we just pop to the next slide, I think we've got some details of the table. So you can see there the napkin that is the printed napkin that works with the tablecloth, but by separating the napkin from the tablecloth with the white placemat as such, it just throws it into relief. And I think just that simple addition of some lovely garden twine, just something foraged from the garden, really simple. It doesn't have to be elaborate. You can see a bit more detail of that lovely ribbed glass. It just gives you that lovely softened kind of refracted light. And because we were talking about Easter, how lovely that basket just full of mini eggs. I know they wouldn't last longer if I was sat in front of them at this point in time. But I think just that lovely thing for us all to kind of indulge in. And then on the right hand side, another of our vases, but again, back to Philippa's point, a simple branch just with some little painted egg decorations, and you have a lovely centerpiece. And because it is just a branch and there's no foliage, the foliage is very much at low level. Again, there's nothing that interrupts that view across the table and interrupts that conversation and that fun that you will be having. And then if we move on to the next slide, this is a slightly more upscale kind of table. It's actually still a table for 6. Again, you can see those ever important seat pads making those dining chairs look super comfortable. We've really tried here to work with just a very simple white textured cotton tablecloth, and I think, you know, sometimes people get concerned about, you know, stains and marks. It's cotton, it goes in the washing machine, you know, hang it out to dry. Because it's textured, actually it doesn't need lots of laundering. And then what we've used on the table here again is using something that feels organic and natural, but we have these lovely seagrass placemats. And what's really beautiful about these is that they are a larger scale, so they frame your dinner plate, so you have that lovely kind of almost lace-like edge just peeping through. And we've got a lovely little bud vase, which again picks up on that kind of ribbed idea. And then just some fun ways with your cutlery, you know, just tying those together with the twine, some just kind of dried grasses. So rather than necessarily decorating the napkin, as we saw on the previous slide, you could do that with your cutlery. And then these are some really fun napkins that we introduced this spring, which just say eat, drink, relax. So just that kind of novelty element, but they're lovely because they work all year round. They're not seasonally specific. And I think on the table you can see where we've got lovely glass candlesticks of different heights, and you've got a little bit of mercury in there. So there's lovely mercury tea lights that just add that lovely kind of additional sparkle to the table. And then I think we have one more slide, which is probably the most important because it's about the food. And I think it's never underestimating just the importance of the dishes that you're using to serve your food. And here we have a lovely heart-shaped dish. We have a lovely glass dish that can go in the oven, and then it just gets popped into this lovely willow basket. So again, you're bringing in that lovely, natural, organic kind of feel. You've got the lovely oval dish and the wooden board. So those serving elements are so important. And we have things in the collection like these little white scallop dishes that we sell as a set of 2. And again, they do that wonderful double duty. They're lovely on the table with sauces or dips, but equally they're lovely on your dressing table with your jewellery. So I just love that idea of trying to always have those practical products that can do lots of different things. And Philippa probably knows I have a bit of an obsession with tea towels, because I think there's something about when you are entertaining, and most of us have our dining table in our kitchen. So I always think a last minute tip is just to pull out a clean tea towel, hang it over the kind of cooker, and everything suddenly kind of feels like it's in order and fresh and kind of clean, because no one wants to look at your dirty tea towel. So a lovely clean tea towel makes all the difference. So hopefully those are just some really kind of simple ideas, and I think it is that point that it's about keeping it simple, layering, thinking about those different layers that you create, thinking about texture, and then thinking about the really important elements of bringing that bit of nature onto your table and lighting a candle, because there's something about that ritual of lighting a candle that makes everything feel quite special.
Yes, absolutely. And do you have any thoughts on scented candles, Mark?
Well, as you know, we sell rather a lot of rather lovely scented candles, but I really don't think that scented candles have a place on the table. I think candles on the table should always be an unscented candle, because you don't want a scent that interferes with the food that you're serving and the lovely taste that hopefully you've prepared. My advice would be, I always run around like an idiot before anyone arrives with a room spray as you kind of come into the hall, so you get that lovely burst, that lovely spritz of scent, or just light a lovely, your favorite scented candle an hour before guests arrive in your hallway. So as you come into your home, you're met with that lovely fragrance, and then you can move into wherever you're kind of dining and drinking, and not have that kind of taking away from the food.
Yeah, absolutely. And also one of our listeners asked if you have any tips for creating a pretty table that also works if you have children there. Do you have any thoughts on that?
Well, I think that's probably when you scrap the tablecloth. So, we have wooden tables in our kitchen, but, we always use a placemat because I think that just works. And even just having a placemat and a coaster gives you that sense of a little bit more occasion. So I think that's probably the simplest thing to do, so you kind of manage that. And I think also it is just that thing of not being too precious about it. As I say, it goes in the washing machine, it dries in no time. So I think there's something about using a napkin, even if you're having kind of a TV supper, there's something about a napkin that just makes it feel more special and more considered. So I always think just, I think it's a bit like giving children a proper glass to drink out of, or as they get older, they have a wine glass with juice in it. They then feel kind of part of that grown up kind of experience.
I think it's so true. I love the way you said that, Mark, because our children, they always feel really special. Yes. When the table's set for them. And in fact, on So Sweet Mother's Day, my middle boy set the whole table for breakfast even before I woke up. And he'd sort of found plants around the house that we'd set with the lovely placemats and loads of glasses. And I think they have this sort of sense that it's about treating people and sort of being a bit spoiled. And I'm so thrilled that he in particular sort of
yeah, and I think it's that whole thing, isn't it, that, you know, by doing that, by sharing those experiences, by, you know, occasionally making a little bit more effort, then hopefully that you know, your children, my children, all of our children, you know, that becomes special and part of how they want to kind of live their lives in the future. And I think, you know, we're all craving some special moments, but as I say, I don't think we need to keep them for when we've got friends and family. Just make those, you know, a midweek kind of supper, even if it's just with you and your partner or with the kids. Just make it a little, you know, even if it's a takeaway, even if it's something from cook that's you've cheated, you know, it doesn't all have to be laborious. Actually making some, you know, some great ideas to kind of some quick cheats for suppers and laying a quick table, but actually you feel like you've had a lovely special time. It's really kind of important.
Yeah, particularly at the moment.
Well, I think always. I think that's hopefully what we've learned is what's really important to those special, those little things. It's not the big things. It's just the everyday little things that actually we hopefully now will pay more attention to, not take for granted, and celebrate them more.
Yeah, and I think also what flowers do and a beautiful table is, yes, of course, there are so many things that are really important in the world. But what these do is they bring people in and they create an atmosphere.
Absolutely.
Points. And you're not going to be sitting over lunch like constantly staring at the flowers, but it's that atmosphere that it creates, and it's also that moment of just pausing and stopping and just being still and enjoying the moment. I think that is what it's about. It's not just the flowers, it's not just the beautiful tablecloth, it's so much more than
that. And I think for me it's that huge pleasure I get from laying a table. I'm not a great cook, but fortunately Sally is a fantastic cook, so it's teamwork. But actually I get such pleasure in laying that table and seeing the pleasure of friends when they come for supper or come for lunch, and that just makes the whole thing, you know, a really memorable occasion.
I agree.
Yeah, me too. Oh, well, thank you. I think that's probably the perfect note to end on. But thank you so much, Philippa and Mark, for joining us this evening.
A pleasure. Thank you.
So inspiring, and I think we've all got lots of ideas now for how we want to dress our tables, whether or not we've got guests. So thank you for joining us. Thank you to everyone who tuned in this evening. I really hope you enjoyed it.